Hello. And so we do want to welcome you to San Jose. We're very proud of our community. And one of the things that you're going to hear from a lot of us is this push into smart cities. And part of it is as much pushing the gas as it often feels pushing the brake, because there's a lot still to be figured out. And so Tony and I are going to go through some of the approaches on how we're going to have to take on smart cities as something that has a lot of promise, but also a lot of concern and worry and vulnerability. And so for us and any mature city, I think you're going to see a compass. Every one of us has where we think smart cities is going to have a play and a real impact in our community. And for us, it's the items above. And I would dare say that any community you go to is going to have similar points, right? We want to make people safer. We want to make it more inclusive so everyone in our community can be part of this new era. For us, it also means sustainability and a concentration on user experience. So Tommy here in the front is part of our IT team. And what we've said is for the future of cities and technology and civic technology, it's really about two things, the customer experience and the employee experience. And if they're able to do their jobs and make the impacts that they need to make, then we're all going to be okay. But there's a lot of devil in the details that we're going to have to work through. And the last thing for us is also a demonstration city. Being in Silicon Valley, this is somewhat unique. We know that we're going to need to try. We know that we're going to need to fail. And we know that we're going to need to fail forward and learn a lot from these experimental technologies because we have some of the most innovative companies in the world located in our neighborhood. And we have about 80,000 businesses. We have 19 strong economic areas in this city of ours, 180 square miles. So we're very protectionist about making sure that everyone gets to thrive. One of the reasons why smart cities is so important for us is we know as cities are laboratories, the shift of population of where you're going to be able to do the most good for the most people is going to be in cities. So if you take a look in the next few decades, how much of America is going to live in our urban centers. That's a good thing because if we get the smart cities thing right, we can impact in a positive way life for a lot of people. And so the large majority of America is going to benefit from this. But we also know that internally there's a great thrust that's about to hit us. So if you take a look at the graph, we have thousands, tens of thousands of devices. We have data coming from those. And what we're seeing from IoT is when we device everything, the data from that, being audio data, visual data, telemetric data, tabular data, all this stuff is ramping up in exponential rates. So it's not just that we have a long linear curve of the amount of exposure and vulnerability we have because each of those is a vulnerability and threat, but also because of the data that's involved. How are we going to cope with this new scale? And for us as a city, it's about taking that data, going from patterns to insights to better decisions and actions. And that's where we see kind of the flaw where we've been stuck with the big data movement for the last 7-8 years, is because we've been about exposing and making things transparent, but it's never been about that. If you can't make a better decision and better action, how much value really is big data? And so we've gone into big decisions and big actions, and that's where we want to land. So this is a descriptive graph, just as an example, where things are happening in San Jose in terms of over 4.5 million rows of 911 data. We said if we want to improve traffic and get to Vision Zero, which is no traffic fatalities from cars or pedestrians or bicyclists or you name it, here's where things happen. But if we really use the data right, we can actually correlate things and get to better decisions. So if you see the police cars and fire apparatus, that's where we would put things to draw down those numbers. And then if you want to really associate other data sources, we can say rain has a certain impact, sunrise location has a certain impact, average travel speed, and holiday traffic. We can actually customize where our public safety resources need to be to further draw down those rates. So we can be really smart, and that's the promise of smart cities. But here's the risks, is so much of what we do is piecemeal. So we have smart streetlights, smart manholes, smart trash cans, and none of those shall meet. And the vendor community is very fragmented in that every one of those investments is a unique one. And that's an unsustainable path. We as cities know that if we're going to make those spot investments, they're not going to pay off in the long term. So how do we make that chasm jump where we say smart cities is something that's enabling across our entire organization? so that we can skill for it and teach people how to build smart city solutions, how to handle the data, what are the security concerns, so that we're not solving cybersecurity for smart cities for every single deployment that we have, but it's broad, and then we have also a good ecosystem that we can rely on in terms of partners. Bless you. And so if you take a look at it, bless you, from 3 levels, operational, there is a lot of detail, a lot of devices, and a lot of management at a scale we've never seen. Tactical is there's also invasive uses of IoT. So if we piece together the police blotter, the 911 information, property information, if we do some of the marketing and social media, in theory, you could piece together information saying an ambulance landed here, it was this type of code, these people live here, here's their social media profiles. You could actually get their health event all the way down to their family and have like an ambulance chaser show up at the hospital to meet them there. So not even just follow the ambulance, they'll actually anticipate where the ambulance goes. And so there's a lot of detail here that we have to master to be able to protect the privacy and civil rights of our residents, but also to enable us to manage this well. And then strategic, we do have an unsustainable and piecemeal environment, and that's why cities are looking for ways to consolidate this and take a platform-based approach that's going to enable us to develop more solutions, better solutions, but also sustain it over time. And so we know the risks are out there, and we'll just quickly go through a couple examples. Is IoT puts out an exposure point that is at a scale that we've never seen before, and we literally have no idea how to manage, right? So if you go from 5 billion devices in the world today to 25 billion devices, and you exponentially curve the amount of data, how do you even handle that? What do you save? Where do you put it? But more importantly is we're a city that goes from airports to zoos, literally A to Z. We have 180 square miles, 1 million people. We're a conglomerate in the sense that we render services that some people would say, if I were a business, I'm not going to do that. But what we have in that is also some utilities and some critical infrastructure that's high in the order of magnitude where we have to protect. So if it is power, if it is water, if it's wastewater, you don't want those things not working. We saw in Katrina that it wasn't a failure because of a natural disaster. The true disaster happened when government failed and couldn't get back on its feet and couldn't help the people who were in need, right? So in terms of the Ukrainian power grid, this is a big one where there's a lot of indicators that there are people testing utility attacks in Ukraine to be able to deploy that as cyber warfare more broadly. And how do you attribute, how do you battle that, and how do you really face up against a nation state that's just dabbling in this to make sure that they have what's an armament that they can do more if ever needed? And normally I would think, that's not all that important. But I keep on listening to stories in the news about North Korea and China and Russia, and it seems more real than ever. So it's not stuff that we can hope away. And then also, how many of us have just keep on hearing this where we have fear fatigue, but it's just scarier every time. That so much of this data is out there. And we as governments are data-rich organizations, so a lot of the indicators show that we are primary targets because we have so much good old data. Data that doesn't lose its value like a credit card when someone says, all right, I've been compromised, give me a new one. We have information that lasts. And so that's of higher value on the dark markets. And so really the aim of what Tony and I want to get at here is how do we prevent the security risks from undermining all the potential that we see in IoT? I mean, we can make people safer. We can make things more inclusive by broadening out the Wi-Fi connection that people who are across the digital divide and have homework apps. Right now, they can't participate in the modern economy as well as others. So we can do all those things, but how can we do it in a way that we have assurance and we have resilience? And so some of the approaches that we advocate for at City of San Jose and are working with vendors and ecosystem partners on is we want that unifying platform. So work together so we can buy something, skill for it, deploy it, build on it in long term. But don't give us spot solutions. We also expect that in a room, The one who says, I have a lot of partners, is going to be our best friend. The one who says, I'm really smart and I have the best thing and I'm the only one who can provide it, we're not going to bet on you as often, right? Because where does that get us in 10 years and 15 years? And in government, one of the interesting things is if you take a look at our accounts payable for technology vendors from 20 years ago, even from 15 years ago, there's 3 or 4 vendors that we still use. A lot of them have been acquired, some have gone out of business, but we have to think in the long term. So that's one of the things I invite everyone to just understand as we approach this problem. We also want things secure from the start. As a CIO, I think all of us who have been CIOs, you feel like you're battling uphill because everything was built without security in mind, and now you're having to pay for all these things to secure it after the fact. And so like one of the pet peeves I have is on DDoS prevention. You should pay for a service for that. It's like, no, I shouldn't. That's hygiene. You should really have a clean network. And so you have these little debates, but we really look for and respect the vendors and the ecosystem partners who can say, we're building this in, and so that we all have the maximum amount of assurance. Nothing's perfect, but that at least we're on together. And then pattern-based security is, I think we all know, and Tony and I would agree, that the era of IP security, passwords, and usernames, it's dead. So how do we get to something that's more proactive in sensing, where you see patterns of activity, and you can act on those? And so we talk with Microsoft, we talk with VMware, we talk with all of these companies and say, you're some of the most important security companies that we have that don't act like it. And they're starting to, which is very reassuring. But we need to get to that new era where we can see the flow and see things real time and act on that rather than after the fact figure out what the heck just happened. And then solution sharing. So for cities and counties, one of the cool things, and states, about us is we like being first, we also like sharing. So if it lifts the tide for one community, we can all benefit from that. So, Roger's in the back, and we are happy and glad to share whatever we have and be partners in this. And so as long as we get our mayor or city manager a good amount of attention, then as soon as that happens, we're like, yeah, let's all pitch in, all get to this point. And one of the points I'd have here is a dream state for IoT is that there are solution stores. If one community has figured it out, another should be able to adopt it pretty readily as well. And if it's secure from the start, then that's even better, because then you have a proliferation of a proven, validated solution. And cities do 80% of the same things, just slightly differently, but at least you have a starting ground. And then also being able to get to a point of joint response. So in fire, for example, if there is a major event, communities will send their fire trucks over there. I think we're getting to the point with cybersecurity where we're going to see these events. We're going to be proactive and share as much as possible, but when something really hits the fan, we're going to have to be ready to step up and send our folks and pitch in however we can. And so later on, you'll see some of the Alliance content at the keynote this at lunchtime, as well as a following session, and that's where we want to go with this. But a lot of it comes back to how do you arm yourself with an architecture that's going to allow you to keep on doing these things, that you're not just talking in concept, right? And so this is the last 2 slides for me before we pass on to Tony, is how do we have an IoT architecture that's going to go from the devices to the data and the flow of data at a new level of scale to having all the way at the top enabled solutions. And then throughout that, making security is addressed at each and every step. And so part of where we'll get with this is if you have that architecture, if you have that platform, you have that ecosystem, what it does is it abstracts the difficult layers and a lot of the menial work down so that we can hopefully create solutions and enable ourselves in a much faster way that doesn't take as much time or people or money, so that we can further expand what we have. And one of the pieces of this is also all that data. How do we get to a point where we can share that? Because we know our traffic and our crime don't stop at our borders. So can you create data lakes and cooperatives where public sector and academia and private sector can build new IP on this and new methods, new algorithms? And this is all part of the promise of IoT. If we can solve a lot of the questions about security and approach and platform. So with that.
I was a CIO for Marine Corps Installations East up until about a year and a half ago. In 12 and a half of my last 13 years, we were engaged in global combat operations. At one point in time, I had 56,000 Marines that were deployed worldwide. and they reached back for us. Hoorah! They reached back to us, and they had local networks, and they had internal networks, and I've been doing this. I did 20 years active duty, 15 years in civil service, and from 1980 to 2012, what was the worst risk to your network? The loose nut between the keyboard and seat back. And unfortunately, that loose nut still exists, and there's still a significant risk to your network. And people look like me that are absolutely convinced that they're related to the deposed king of Ethiopia, and that they left me $70 million. And if I click here, they'll start working out the process for me to get that money. They're still out there. And I go everywhere I go, and I travel a lot and give a lot of these briefs. Anybody that does fishing and spear fishing, they see it all the time still. That problem didn't go away. But in 2012, we got a brand new problem. We got the IoT. In 2012, we just saw an explosion of this stuff showing up in the networks. And as Rob put it so eloquently, if you don't build in vice bolt-on security, you're already risked for compromise. So that's me. I looked better back then. I can tell you that picture was my official bio photo, and that guy was a complete ass. I know him. I know him well. My wife and kids are absolutely convinced I'm a lot nicer now. But when we talk about IoT, you just think about your house. I got those iRobots, and both of them are on my phone. They show, when I'm traveling at 2 in the morning, I turn the robot on and have it start vacuuming the living room. And then I turn on the camera and I watch my wife get up and go over and kick the damn thing, send it back to home base. And then I'll wait till about 4:30 and do it again. And, for a year and a half now, she's convinced that thing is possessed. She has no idea that I have an app on my phone, and I'm the guy that is hacking her sleep. So it's unfortunate they're going to put this on the. I'm probably going to get caught. I've been married 35 years. She won't leave. She won't die. I don't want to give her half my stuff. So I taught her how to make dirty martinis and bought her a GTO. Figuring the problem's going to fix itself at some point in time. I do live in North Carolina, so I talk kind of slow, and I think even slower. No longer is the loose nut between the keyboard and seat back that you need a bigger wrench for to fix the biggest threat to your network. It's that IoT stuff, and I can tell you on the Marine base, we were not a ForeScout shop. I am the senior strategist for ForeScout. I got like 9 different little. I just do strategy for ForeScout, and I had other vendors in there. And ForeScout came in and said, "Let us put our stuff on there." And after I got done joking about their name and and the company that I'd never heard of, they put their solution on the network in one day. They do an absolutely free, in passive mode, no risk to your network assessment and discovery, and they discovered thousands of things on my DoD network that we had no idea were on there. Because you're not the only person putting stuff on your network. When you think about Camp Lejeune, where I was based out of, 225 square miles, 150,000 people living and working on the base at any one time, and it's a city. The Navy's putting ICS and SCADA devices and meters and stuff all over. I mean, they know how much sewer is going through the sewage, and I can tell you on a Marine base, that's a significant amount. But if you hack one of those pumps and dump that raw sewage into the river, you've just destroyed a shrimping, oyster, civilian community, multi-billion-dollar EPA level event. And all that stuff's on the network. Our logisticians, God bless them, they were, military travel's on their belly. And mine's getting bigger as I get further and further from my retirement days, and I'm happy about it. Our logisticians and supply guys, warehouses full of stuff. We've got one of the largest ammo supply points in the world. tens of millions of rounds, hundreds of millions of boxes of meals and pieces of gear, and I mean just mile-long stretches of buildings that are warehouses. Well, we used to have somebody that counted that stuff. Now you put an RFID tag on it, and you stick a sensor up in the ceiling, and you put in a wireless network, and somebody comes in, they scan the stuff, and off they go. Everything's barcoded. Well, that's all wireless stuff on your network. Well, if you got supply warehouses with, billions of dollars worth of gear, now you got to put in security cameras. So the provost marshal and, the equivalent of the sheriff, and they're putting cameras everywhere. There's 21 cameras at last count at the front gate at Camp Lejeune, including a license plate recognition system that runs your license plate against the National Crime Information Database. We had unconventional nuclear warfare and chem biodefense systems. We've got Wendy's on the base. Well, all that stuff's on the base network. I mean, it's pretty cool because you own it, and I own voice, video, and data, and just an unbelievable staff of smart people that made stuff coming. They found thousands of things, including the enterprising young Marine who put a terabyte external hard drive on a laptop with 10,000 copyright infringements. It's $1 million fine. And, self-reporting that to the CG, you go up to his office and you walk in to give him the report, and then you got the report, and in the other hand you got a trash bag, and he's telling you, what the hell's that trash bag for? It's to pick up chunks of my ass on the way out, so I didn't want to mess up your carpet. Those are uncomfortable conversations when you walk in and you tell your boss, I have thousands of open vulnerabilities on my network. So the discovery of a tool that does not use an agent, that found every device, wired, wireless, if it had an IP, if it got an IP, it was an instantaneous discovery, classification, hygiene assessment, and we could orchestrate the actions it took, was a game changer for Lieutenant Colonel Larry Nathan, who was my CISO. I was a CISO before I was a CIO, so his job sucked no matter how you went about it. So I don't have many slides. We're, is there a patch for stupid? You have people on your network today, and you sit there and you talk to them about, why did you just spend 35 of your 40 hours at work learning how to do wheelie stands on your sport bike? And they're like, well, I'm a military policeman. I need to be able to, what, do this? See it all day for a week? No, a dog doesn't hunt. So is there a patch for stupid? Automation. We have to get out of the business of scan, patch, validate, report, scan, patch, validate, report. 410 patches last year, 208 work days. It's impossible to keep systems compliant. But most importantly, you have to discover them all. And everywhere I go with ForeScout and they do one of these assessments, you get to keep the data and you get to watch them wipe the hard drive, and they don't take the data back and talk about it, which is kind of cool because they, sometimes you don't want your dirty laundry aired. So you get an assessment of everything touching your network and how is it a risk to you today. And that's, once they knew those proofs of concept like that, typically that actually sold us. I ended up working for the company because it was something that I could believe in agentless, and it fixes other agents. So it went in and fixed other stuff like our HBSS and McAfee EPO agents and some of the other agents that we have. So some of these things, no longer exist. Your vulnerabilities are no longer 2 years old. The WannaCry virus was, the patch came out 3 months later. It was active. So you don't have the luxury of going out and having 6 months to patch stuff. When stuff comes out, you actually have to keep it compliant now. When something gets on your network, you have to know about it now. I was this week earlier down in Florida, and I went to a commercial company that is a medical company, and they asked me to interview their CIO because they're a little concerned about his ability to continue to do their job. They had an outage, no high availability, weekly backups weren't done. I mean, just it was a train wreck for them. And I was absolutely shocked when he told me that the assessment room with 50 systems in it and testing servers has never been patched because they're afraid they'll break the test. I said, well, is it a closed network? Well, yeah, except it's hooked up to our internet service provider so that the doctors in this particular discipline can take the test remotely. And I just looked at him. I said, I could probably go pull that test off the net today. It was just so many things are on your plate. You spend your entire life in leadership playing whack-a-mole. I mean, you're just wrestling alligators. And when you should be going out and getting a bigger gun and hunting pregnant alligators. Proactive. As Rob said twice, you gotta get, if you don't get proactive, you've already lost the fight. So, industry stats. These are cool. Let me know when you're, yeah, that's good enough. What do you want to get? Yeah, you can't do a smart city, you can't do a small network, you can't do a large network without knowing what's on the network. And that baseline fundamental security posture is absolutely critical. You have to know what's on the network. If you cannot, for 100% sure, say, I know everything on my network. And I think about my home network, my cigar humidor. I can adjust the temperature and the humidity from anywhere in the world on my cigar humidor. It's on my network. I got cameras all around my house because I live near the beach, and there's a group of young teenagers down there that really like my swimming pool. And I have a bar on my back porch that's really well stocked, because if you're going to have a cigar room, you need to have a bar. And those teenagers like my bar too. So I got security cameras. My doors. And now, Nest, Alexa. I was in an office in a semi-secure area. Thank God it wasn't secret. And the guy had Alexa playing on his desk, playing some music. I said, what's that connected to? Oh, we just connected to the network. Really? You've got an Alexa in a semi-secure office where you talk personnel stuff, and you've got an Alexa tied to the commercial internet, and you're a security guy. I want you to think this through. I'll wait for it. And he didn't get it. Instantaneous response, being able to find these loops and close these loops. The thing about trying to do a smart city, and we did it, and if you look up Comply to Connect on Google, you'll see about the third or fourth article down. The CIO for the Marine Corps, CISO Ray Latier, will actually say that a third of the Marine Corps was 100% compliant the other day. Yeah, for 4 hours, people. 4 hours, we hit 100% compliance. But we went from an average of 60 to 99 as a baseline, just by doing the discovery and the automation that some of these products bring to the table. And every product you buy needs to be able to be integrated and industry standards so that it can integrate with other products, because, as Rob said, companies come and go, technology comes and goes, and it constantly grows. And I remember in 1980, I had a pager. I thought I was cool. And Windows 3.1.1 for work groups and DBase 3+, that was the stuff. I mean, I was a Unix guy, so I'm like, holy crap, look at this. You can just click on stuff. It took a little while to figure out the mouse, but and anybody who thinks that computer nerds aren't funny, never really thought about bit, byte, nibble, mouse, motherboard, daughter board. Those guys they got a great sense of humor. They're not socially awkward, yes, but they definitely do it. So agentless discovery, that's the one thing that you really need. If you're going to do a discovery, you need to make sure it's agentless, because unless you're going to go out and physically see every device and check that agent, Agents break, agents age, agents die. You get one Flash player upgrade and agents go offline and don't talk to the right back-end servers. So agentless discovery is absolutely critical. Right now, as far as I know, ForeScout's still the only game in town, and I expect some of the other major players to go agentless discovery pretty quick, because it's going to become a differentiator as we get closer and closer to 30 billion IoT devices sitting on your network. So this is kind of interesting. 99% of your IoT devices don't have agents. So you're not going to be able to do it. I mean, they're running a BIOS or an iOS of some sort, and or firmware, and you don't know what that firmware is doing if you don't do an assessment. And if you don't know it's there, as some people recently found out with some of those cameras, it's gonna bite you. That's one of them alligators that'll get you, and you get to take that trash bag and go see the boss and try to explain how you got bit. And it's just, you don't want to do that. You don't want to lose services. I had 8 bases in 6 states, 8 different 911 centers on the eastern seaboard, and losing a combat operations center or a 911 center, for me was a non-starter. More importantly, if one of my combat operations deployed MAGTAVs or MEF or MU needed bean bullets or Band-Aids, if I couldn't provide that, for me that was the end of my career. But more importantly, it was the end of somebody's rope, because they don't call you unless they need something. And I can tell you, every time a customer calls you, something doesn't work the way it was advertised. They can't fix it and they're frustrated. They're angry and they're absolutely convinced you're not going to help them. And so you got to get past that, and automating those baseline security functions is a way to get there. So again, BYOD is coming faster than everybody knows. This tidal wave of stuff that's coming at us, until you actually count it, you don't realize what's already there. But what's coming with these smart houses and smart cars, I mean, my car is always connected to the internet. It's a connected drive car. I have been on a VTC while going up the highway with folks. Now, I wasn't looking at there, I was looking at the highway, but I was chatting with people while I'm going up the highway on my car. If you lose the key fob, you can call them, they can start your car. And there's a lot of stuff out there and it's just going to continue to grow, particularly as you think about first responders and your public works departments. First responders are going to automate everything. I can tell you every piece of gear on military bases, they know where it's at in the 911 center. They got a map and they know where it's at, what it's doing, who was doing it, and how fast they were going when they did it. And that can be embarrassing. So you got to see it, you can control it, and you got to orchestrate it and get that stuff really automated. Shut down some of that baseline human error. Use your security folks better than scan, patch, validate, report. You can get away from that. We actually tied in another product. I don't know, y'all are probably using SCCM. It did not, because I had so many proprietary applications and programs of record, that it was not as reliable as we wanted. So we brought in a different solution to augment it, and we went from 60% to 99% compliance as a baseline. And and that's just absolutely amazing numbers. So I realigned some staff. They stopped playing whack-a-mole and hunting, and wrestling alligators all day, and started going hunting pregnant alligators to reduce the alligators in the pond, which was a really good thing. We stand, I think, all the CCRI. It's a cybersecurity inspection, readiness inspection, and our average scores across the DoD were in the 70s, and we never hit under a 90. And we were always ready for no-notice inspections. you don't want to have to spend 6 weeks getting ready for it. You always want to be able to go to sleep at night knowing you're in the 99% compliance. Your network's not at risk, and you'll sleep a lot better, and your hair won't turn white. So those are what you get out of it when you start that. So that kind of concludes what I'm doing. I know all of y'all are state and local employees, and you're never thanked. No one ever says to you, I know you don't get paid what you'd make on the other side. And you work long hours, nights, weekends, you sacrifice, and most of the time you really don't get treated, as well as you should. But guys like me who, now live in your worlds, we appreciate you. We do. We thank you a lot. So I think we're going to take a couple of questions if you have any. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
So yeah, sorry. As working for a small city, we're staffed mostly for infrastructure, plumbing, keeping the lights going. So we try to do this, IoT initiative, and we're just inundated by people coming to us with new sensors, and not only new sensors today, but they said in 6 months we're going to replace them with even better sensors. And I have no idea what they're collecting and what they're transmitting, and I have to take them at their word. And that they don't have some backdoor like the IoT cameras that have a hard-coded login. How can a city, and they're not even on my network. They're just feeding their private network on the cloud, but yet it's my decision to install them. So I give this green light, and by the way, they've been doing video capture of all the people and they weren't supposed to. How can a city possibly keep up with that? It just seems like it's an overwhelming task.
That's part of that whole discovery process. Once you do the discovery, what we found out was that the instant a device comes on your network, so if one stays on, like one of these ICS things, the orchestration and control piece of ForeScout we used to do a hygiene inspection. And we captured what data that thing was sending. We go through a ATO, authority to operate process in the DoD, that, okay, I want to look at the data, I want to know what you're collecting, I want to see where it's going, I want to see who gets it at the other end, and whether or not you can have it. So once we discovered all these things, my poor CISO went through the nut roll of having to do the control and orchestrate with the other tools we had that do the forensics analysis, the hygiene inspections, and we did not find a single tool in the arsenal we couldn't integrate with. So grab the discovery, do a classification. That's a camera. What kind of camera? Well, it's an Axis 2110 Pantone tilt zoom. It drops into a bucket that says that's these. What firmwares on that are safe? These firmwares. What firmware is on it? This firmware. Well, that's not a good firmware. Let's reflash it. So we automated it by doing that, and the initial report for us was so large, and it just looked like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So that's what we did. We started, let's find everything on the network. Let's classify it. Now let's start doing hygiene inspections and see where my biggest holes, my biggest vulnerabilities are. Particularly, a lot of those things, if their network goes down, does it have an automatic configuration to fail over to your network and you didn't know about it? We found out vending machines. I never knew this, but I had an uncle that did a vending machine route, and he drove around and he filled up vending machines. Well, they don't do that anymore. They put in a vending machine and it looks for an open Wi-Fi. And if you can't find one, it'll use the vending machine cellular system to tell you when it needs to be, filled and what's selling, what's not selling. But they look for an open Wi-Fi first. There's a major university in the United States that will tell you that a vending machine finding an open Wi-Fi can get into the LED lighting system, move sideways, and do a distributed denial of service attack looking for Chinese restaurants for 15 minutes every hour, and shut your entire university network down. And you can research that online. But
And if I can add in, so a couple different approaches is, one, we pulled together the multidisciplinary approach of making sure that Public Works, Transportation, Economic Development, IT, and that security function are all part of the same table whenever those requests come up. So we look at it together, and part of our job is the education process of making sure people understand the importance of security. And the Dyne attack was one where our transportation and public works folks said, "What the hell just happened? Is that possible?" And it's like, yeah, it just happened. And another piece was contractually. We've said that there's some, in our IT terms, some liability that the vendors take, that they are going to be secure up to whatever current standards are, NIST, ISO, and those, that they're going to breach notify us if anything ever occurs, and that they're financially responsible for any restitution or repair. And part of that is saying that we don't have a full control over saying we know what BIOS is appropriate or not, or which patch is appropriate or not, but someone's responsible for it. And then hopefully we can mature into where we have enough of an ecosystem and partners that are strong enough that we can manage this together. But on your point, I don't think anyone has a coherent management approach yet, which is making this really hard. And so for us, it's everyone's participating, everyone understands the risks, that someone owns risks across those deployments, and then heading forward, we're trying to hit a higher bar. But we haven't seen anyone be able to hit that high bar, especially where you and I would have concerns about, every organization can't have the same talent doing the same menial labor, because that's just a recipe for disaster, right? So we need to put this at some level where the right people can do it very efficiently, and we're still looking for that. But ForeScout is, I've heard great things about that tool. We're not a ForeScout shop either, but that detection piece is very important before you can ever say to our bond and insurers and auditors that we have good command of our environment.
But we're out of time. We'll
Yeah, I
take.
have a question for you, Tony. Is ForeScout, oh, sorry. Is ForeScout a suite of tools that allows you to discover, it classifies, and then how does it take actions once it determines that a device shouldn't be on your network? Does it integrate with something like Checkpoint or some other security tools, or is it part of the ForeScout suite?
And let me add, Tommy's asking this because right now I call Tommy.
Well, I'm shocked I can answer this question because I'm not a ForeScout engineer, but I am very familiar with their capability set. So ForeScout is the baseline. It does the discovery and the classification, and then passes it off to whatever tool you have. If you've got an industry standards tool that uses API calls, we've got approximately 70 modules of things that we already integrate with, Checkpoints, the Splunks, you name them, McAfee's. So we've already got a full bidirectional integration. If it's not a bidirectional integration, it can do an API one way. It also, we integrated ours with our trouble ticketing system. So not only did it do the inventory, it would do the CMDB, asset management database, and tell me when stuff needed to be life cycled. And it could cut tickets, and it could do pop-ups to users. So if somebody plugged an unclassed machine into a classified network, where you have different networks that do different things. Somebody plugs a machine in the wrong network, they would get a pop-up. You're on the wrong network. You're not going to get any data. You're certainly not going to get any access. You need to be on this network if you're going to continue to work here. So.
And I think that's it, right? He's jumping up in the background. It's good. All right, so thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for coming.